about everybody else.
Okay. What would you add to what Paul's saying? You think about the sacrifices described in Leviticus, which are intentional and costly. What does it mean for you to personally offer yourself to God with the same heart? Add about 6 people. Add about 6 or 7 more. They always come in late. What's that, Craig?
You want your numbers up.
Oh, yeah.
having low
It's the
numbers.
preacher count.
Take them up.
It's the preacher count.
You did say 9:32, right?
I did say 9:32, didn't I? It's 9:36. Actually 37 according to my iPad, which is probably right.
Without blemish, the best you
Okay.
have, the best you are.
All right, what would that look like without blemish in your life, offering up to God? What would that look like?
I
Less
don't know, I have
legalistic.
blemish.
Huh?
It's less legalistic.
Okay.
There are all these rules and very specific types of offerings for very specific types of things.
Yes.
It would be very, if you were going by Leviticus, it would be really, I don't know, hard.
Okay.
Less hard and more rules.
All right.
That's good.
What are you thinking, Beth?
Maybe less of what, like, when I think of that, I think of like giving up your own will and changing what you want to do.
Okay. Anyone else? Not too sure, Craig, pulling the face. So we're going to look at in this particular session is the 5 main offerings or sacrifices they are going to give God. And here's what we need to remember, okay? This is a holy God who wants to be in relationship with an unholy people. And he's saying, this is how you do the relationship with me. So when we see the 5 main sacrifices, and he'll talk about all of them, it says something about who God is. Like he's holy, or he's forgiving, or there's a peace offering and he wants peace between himself and the worshiper, right? Okay, so remember that. And then what Paul says in Romans 12:1 about being living sacrifices is saying that we don't bring animals anymore, we don't bring food anymore, we bring ourselves, like Paul is saying here, and the Apostle Paul too. We're bringing our choices, daily choices, we're bringing our time, we're bringing our love, we're bringing ourselves, and whatever all that, without blemish, looks like as an offering to God, okay? Does that make sense? All right, I'm going to hit play. And hopefully this will be light enough and work straight away. And then we've got some questions after. Of course, why is it not playing the music? It played it like 20 seconds ago when I touched it. Isn't that weird? Isn't that so weird, technology? Checked it twice.
It's not your fault, it's just the tech.
It's the tech.
There he goes. He's talking. He's just no
Isn't
sound.
that weird? The
Volume.
volume's up. I hit it like 3 times.
Is the volume up on the little
Like a
thing
computer?
on the sliding bar?
Over here on this.
Yeah. Try
Yeah,
that.
it is.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Freak show.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Let's see if I take it out and hit play.
Right.
And there's still no volume.
Among all the nations.
Oh, there's volume now.
Maybe it'll come back.
Is your cord loose?
Putting it back in. Everybody's trying all kinds of things.
World. And then what?
There it
It's
is.
not. It's not
You stand
so.
on your head. Try it on your head.
It's not so weird.
It is weird. It's not your fault, though. It's just the way it is.
was my fault.
Welcome back to our study of Leviticus. We in this session are going to be covering the same portion of text we talked about last time, Leviticus chapters 1 through 7, but we're going to be approaching it in a little bit of a different way. These chapters are about the sacrifices that God has given his people as a way to come back closer to God. We remember that God has chosen Israel as his own people among all the nations in the world, And that what characterizes them is not that they're so much better than everyone, but that God's love is upon them and that his presence is to be with them. He has promised to be with them, and so he has taught them how to build this structure called the tabernacle, where he will come and dwell among them. But here he is telling them how to be brought back in. And so we looked at these various sacrifices kind of at a 10,000-foot level last time and talked about some key themes, noting that indeed God is inviting his people back into his presence. It is not that God is far off saying, you guys got to come up here. No, God intends to come down, and he is inviting those who are his own to come in with him into this place called the tent of meeting, especially through their representative Moses. So God's inviting his people back into his presence, but his presence is not something to be taken lightly. His presence is actually quite dangerous, not because he's bad, but because he's kind of like the sun. He provides life, but if you get too close without the proper protective material, you're toast. And so God's presence is dangerous, and it can only allow into it that which is wholly like it. And so we have the seriousness with which these things are laid out. And then the final part we saw was that concretely, what God gives his people as a way of coming into his presence is these sacrifices of atonement. And we talked about the concept of atonement and how it doesn't always mean only one thing. It can mean different sorts of things. It can be about moving from ritually unclean to clean. It could move from being common to being holy, or it could move from actually being sinful, having done wrong, to having your sins forgiven. And all of these things are kind of held together through this idea of kippur, or atonement, or a covering that pays the ransom for sin and offers the cleansing. And you may remember we laid out a chart that we'll continue to talk about as the book unfolds, distinguishing between some important concepts. You have God's holiness at the very top, and so to be holy is to be really fit for his presence. But then underneath that, you have some things that are common, and you don't need to be afraid of God in the common area, but you need to be careful. And then even within this realm of common, you have the idea of ritually clean and unclean. And then below that, you have like genuine sinfulness and sin and sickness and infirmity and all sorts of things that, again, we'll talk about as we go, bring you down that spectrum, and the sacrifices bring you up, making you fit to do life with God. And so it really is all about relationship and living with God. And so today what we want to do is to look at these big 5 sacrifices that are talked about in Leviticus chapters 1 through 7. Now I want to sort of offer, I guess, something of a caveat or a disclaimer. There are a lot of details in this text, and we will read some of it, though we won't read all of it. And I will explain some of it, though I won't explain all of it. And a lot of these details, I strongly encourage you to follow up this relatively short video by doing some of your own research. And I'll put in the handout some areas where you can look further into things. But let's go ahead and take a look at these big 5 sacrifices that are talked about in Leviticus chapters 1 through 7. We're going to look at the whole burnt offering, the grain offering, or sometimes called cereal offering, and then the peace offering, the sin offering, and the guilt offering. So I want to read a little bit of the beginning of this, and then we'll kind of break down what we see. We remember that the book begins by saying, the Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting. He said, speak to the Israelites and say to them, when anyone among you brings an offering to the Lord, bring as your offerings an animal from either the herd or the flock. And then we get the specific instructions. If the offering is a burnt offering from the herd, you are to offer a male without defect. You must present it at the entrance to the tent of meeting so that it will be acceptable to the Lord. You are to lay your hand on the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted on your behalf to make atonement for you. You are to slaughter the young bull before the Lord, and then Aaron's sons, the priests, shall bring the blood and splash it against the sides of the altar at the entrance to the tent of meeting. You are to skin the burnt offering and cut it into pieces. The sons of Aaron the priest are to put fire on the altar and arrange wood on the fire. Then Aaron's sons the priest shall arrange the pieces, including the head and the fat, on the wood that is burning on the altar. You are to wash the internal organs and legs with water, and the priest is to burn all of it on the altar. It is a burnt offering, a food offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. So that is just one description of this offering. And then it's followed up by, all of these actually are followed up by, if you don't have the money to provide the offering that is really the ideal, there's a way for you to still offer the same kind of offering. And so what I want to do for our time is to walk through these 5, to break down some of the different elements that we see in them, and then at the very end to talk about how these relate to today. What do we do with these today as people who are following Jesus? And we'll see how all these things fit together in that particular way. So when it comes to the whole burnt offering, it's called that because well, it's like you burn all of it. That's kind of the thing that distinguishes it from all the others. And so let's start where they begin. The first thing to know is that you have to offer this perfect animal. And the word in Hebrew is tamim. You may remember that the Psalms ask the question, who can dwell in God's presence? The one whose walk is tamim, blameless. And so the idea here is that you offer an animal that doesn't have any defects. That's how the English translates it. In this particular case, for the whole burnt offering, it must be a male animal with no defects. And so you bring this proper animal here and you press your head, is really what it says. You press your hand on the head of this animal as a way of identifying with this animal. And like the concept of atonement more broadly, the pressing of the hand on the head can mean different.
Isn't that weird? Can you lip read? The cat's hair.
It's disgusting.
Here, and you press your head, is really what it says. You press your hand on the head of this animal as a way of identifying with this animal. And like the concept of atonement more broadly, head can mean different things depending on the offering. And so here you press your head, identifying yourself with that bull. That bull is now in your place in some important way, and then you kill it. And you splash and sprinkle the blood on different parts of this whole process in order to indicate that the blood is bringing about something new. The blood of this animal, the life that's being poured out, is somehow taking care of the problem of death and providing life to the worshiper. And there's a lot of blood. And then the last part of this one is that you burn it. You burn the whole thing. That's what stands apart about this particular one, is right there at the altar, every single part of this is burned. And so after you have a description of the different things that are done, the text says this is a food offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. And the idea here is that there's a sense in which the offering of the sacrifice symbolizes having a meal at God's table. So it's like he's inviting you into his house and his table. Now you bring, I have a friend of mine who teaches the Old Testament. He says, really the idea here is God just moved into the neighborhood. He likes to throw parties. The parties are always at his house. You bring the meat, but then you're going to prepare it on his grill in a really particular way. And so there's this symbol of closeness, of welcome. You are at the table of God, invited in, and you need not fear in your presence. There's some other pieces of this that are worth mentioning as far as the meaning of these different things. The emphasis on this particular sacrifice is that it is the most costly type of animal you could offer. The male without defect was particularly valuable for those who had flocks and herds. And so there's a cost involved in this particular one. The other piece of this is that it is an offering in which all of him, that is the male offering, the male sacrifice, the male bull, all of him is offered for all of sin. There are going to be other offerings that are about different specific sins you commit. But this one is really about not so much sins, but sin, the condition that we're in, the problem of sinfulness that characterizes us. And so in many ways, this is the first one presented because it's very broad in the sense that it is the offering that takes care of all of sin. It is worth mentioning that this offering does have to do with the wrath of God on sin. The word wrath isn't used in the image in the wording of this particular phrase, but when you see the burnt offering showing up in other places of Scripture, and we'll put these references in the notes, but 2 Samuel 24 and 2 Chronicles 29, you have the idea that God's wrath is coming upon his people for their legitimate sin. God's not losing his temper, but he has a principled hostility against any evil, any wrongdoing, and his wrath comes upon them. But then the burnt offering is given, and God's wrath is appeased and is no longer coming upon the people. So that's really what's going on here, is the technical term propitiation of God's wrath, which is the idea that you would be experiencing the wrath, but because the sacrifice is offered and dies in your place, you don't have to experience it. There's also on this one the sense that it is symbolizing of the worshiper giving their whole self over to God. So there's a little bit of a double meaning involved here, where the sacrifice takes care of the whole problem of sin, and also it symbolizes me giving up my whole self to God. So that's the whole burnt offering. And then it's followed by an offering that kind of feels a little bit out of place because it's the only one that doesn't involve animals. It's called the grain offering, or sometimes referred to as the cereal offering. And similarly, to what we saw of the whole burnt offering, you have a description of what the worshiper is supposed to do. And so you bring the bread, and some of it is cooked and uncooked, and there's different ways in which you're supposed to prepare it, and you cover it with, obviously there's flour involved, and there's olive oil involved. And then one of the interesting things about that particular sacrifice is there's an emphasis on covering it with incense, and then especially the salt. I wanted to read this particular part to you. It says here in chapter 2 is what I'm looking at, verse 11, every grain offering you bring to the Lord must be made without yeast. You're not to bring any yeast or honey in a food offering presented to the Lord. You may bring them to the Lord as an offering of first fruits, but not offered on the altar. Then verse 13, season all your grain offerings with salt. Do not leave the salt of the covenant of your God out of your grain offerings. Add salt to your offerings. And so there's this emphasis 3 times on putting salt on this particular offering. So what does this mean? Usually it's kind of an accompanying sacrifice, generally speaking. And so it carries and completes the meaning of whatever one it's offered with. So for instance, if you were offering a whole burnt offering and a grain offering, the grain offering kind of gleans its meaning from the whole burnt offering. It really doesn't have a whole lot of meaning on its own terms. It reinforces things. It's sort of like filling out the meal, so to speak. If you were to go to someone's house, you don't just want meat, you also want some additional things on the side. The one thing that, as I read, does seem to be a point of emphasis is the salt 3 times. In the middle time, it's mentioned as the salt of the covenant. Why? And our best understanding of this, or it's not a guess really, but our best hypothesis is salt is indestructible. You can't make actual salt actually unsalty. It's everlasting. And so it symbolizes the everlasting nature of the covenant God has made with his people. It symbolizes the indestructible power of God's promise. And so essentially you're sealing, you're saying, I put salt on this as a way of identifying that I know that the forgiveness that was offered me is legit. The cleansing that it offered me is real, and that my worship of God is similarly deeply expressed. And so you have this expression of gratitude and commitment, this request for more help that again gains its meaning from the one that it's connected to. Let's keep going through these big 5. You move from the grain offering to the peace offering, or what is sometimes called the fellowship offering. I'm giving you multiple phrases for a lot of these because they're not like titled in the text in the way that we might title them in our Bibles with different headings, and depending on the translation that you're reading, it might say something different. So the peace offering is up next, and similar to the whole burnt offering in certain ways, you need a perfect animal without blemish. You don't bring your busted animals. You bring your costly stuff. You bring your stuff that's in good shape. It symbolizes what is required to come into God's presence. Now, the difference here in this one is that though it has to be without defect, it can be a male or a female. This offering works either way. And once again, you press the head here, except what's interesting is, the pressing of the hand on the head over here represents the identification and really the atonement. Atonement is a word that specifically is used. Over here, you press the head, but there's no mention of atonement, because this offering is actually not about taking care of the sin problem. And yet still, you are in a different way, because of the offering, identifying yourself with that particular animal. Once again, you slaughter the animal, and then you splash the blood in relevant places, and then you burn some. You actually don't burn all of the animal in the peace offering, you burn some of it. So what does this one mean? This one actually can mean a lot of different things. A lot of times in the Old Testament, if you were to search out this offering, you would find that it often accompanies the whole burnt offering. And so it's offered, the line would be on top of the whole burnt offering, not meaning necessarily literally on top of, but it is on the same altar, and there's a sense in which it's completing some sort of act of worship, some sort of act of communication between you and God. And it is really all about peace, or shalom. It takes its title as an offering, or its description as an offering, from the Hebrew word shalom, which is about all things being in proper order. So we have a peaceful relationship with God, and that results in peace around us, and peace with the creation that he's given us. And again, another thing that distinguishes this one is that it's optional. You can choose to give it. You may give it for any number of reasons. You may give it just to say thank you. A thank offering is a subset of the peace offering. You might give it to communicate a vow to God. So I promise you, God, that I will fill in the blank. And you would offer a peace offering as a vow. You could also just offer what's called a free will offering. I just want to. I just want to celebrate. This is a solemn, but it's also very celebratory. and that you are acknowledging the peace that has been brought. You're not trying to achieve something, but you're acknowledging and expressing your gratitude in various ways for the peace that God has offered you. So you can even start to see how there's definitely overlap between these things, but there also are distinctions. And as always, again, whether you've got to pause it now or look afterwards, I want you, after we talk through this, to go back and read through the text and see how this helps open up some of the meaning for you. The fourth offering that's talked about is called the sin offering or the purification offering. And in this one, you have some differences from all the other offerings. This one is not exactly the same as even any of the others. Really, these three are the ones that refer to sin. This one's different in that it's aimed at different kinds of sin. There are two descriptions of the kinds of sin that this one covers. One is, it's a difficult phrase to translate, sinning not with a high hand, sometimes translated inadvertent sin or unintentional sin. And the idea is that sometimes you sin boldly and you very intentionally are rebelling against God's commands. Other times I don't want to say sin accidentally, but that's the challenge, is it's kind of hard to describe. It's like the type of sins that you commit and then you realize afterwards, why did I do that? And even if there's a part of you in the moment that knows what you're doing, it's not like you're, looking at the sky, shaking your fist at God. It's just that you're weak and you're falling into it. And then afterwards realizing, I can't believe that happened. So that's something that's covered by this particular offering. Also, sins of omission. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that language, but the idea is sins of commission are bad things that you do. Sins of omission are good things that you leave undone. This one covers the good things that you leave undone. And particularly, it points out a situation where if one of the members of the community is being accused of something and you have truthful information and you withhold that information, you don't speak up on behalf of that person, you're guilty because you should have spoken up. And this is the particular offering that you offer in that regard. The other way that one is differentiated is not just with respect to the type of sins that it covers, but also it's differentiated with respect to the people. It can be offered for a number of different kinds of people, and you actually have different regulations for those who it's offered for. So different sinners, so to speak. The high priest would offer a sin offering that would be a little bit different than that for the people as a whole, which would be a little bit different than that for like an elder or a leader who wasn't a priest, which would be different from that who was a member. And so you've got different rules that you'll see in the text. They're all really about the same thing in terms of the type of thing that it covers. And that's where you find actually some similarities. Even though it's different, you still have some of those same elements. You have to offer a perfect animal. And it has to be a male without defect for some of the categories, but for just any old member of the community, it can be a male or female without defect. You press your hand on the head, and here it is connected to atonement, and it is even very specifically connected to forgiveness. You press your hand on the head because it is making atonement for you, as a result of which your sins will be forgiven. And so you have a forgiveness going on in this particular case. Then you have the blood that is sprinkled and splattered and spread in some different ways than some of the others, because it's not just covering one part, but it's really covering every part of the process. And then you also burn it. Now, in this particular case, you burn some of it right there at the altar, and then you remove other portions where you burn them far away outside the camp. It's not entirely clear what this represents, but I tend to think that the idea is that the burning of it symbolizes the fact that it's not taken care of, it's removed. And then there's kind of a second way of symbolizing the same thing. You carry off these other portions and burn them elsewhere to communicate the fact that your sin is being taken far away from you. You are indeed being forgiven. You are indeed atoned. The meaning of this one has come out in the ways in which we've described it. It really is a sacrifice of atonement and specifically forgiveness. You have here the penalty being paid. Chapter 5, verse 6 makes that very clear, that there was a penalty upon you that has now been taken care of, and you will not experience the full consequences. But this is a thick one, man. There's so much going on here because it's also purification. And you might think, what's the difference? Well, the difference is forgiveness is about the fact that you won't face the full consequences of what you've done. Purification is about you becoming a person who is ready to be welcomed into God's presence. And so you don't just have the forgiveness of guilt, but the cleansing of the person. And man, I don't want to preach too quick. I want to let the text speak on its own terms before we jump to application. But that's not hard for me to relate to. There's a sense in which I have this guilt problem, but there's also a sense in which I have the shame problem. The guilt's been taken care of, but I still feel this stain of dirtiness on me. And this particular offering, I think, is directed specifically at that experience of sin, that it covers it in all these various ways. There also is a sense in which, a person has become holy, a person has become a member of God's people, and they're pursuing the path of righteousness, but then they trip and fall here and there. And this is one that specifically covers the sins for those who are really trying to worship God well. Well, let's talk about the fifth and final offering, the guilt offering, or sometimes called the reparation offering. This one is unique in a few different ways. One thing is it's for specific sins. It is for sins against God's holy things. And I think that probably means, kind of playing fast and loose with anything that is dedicated for worshipful use, whether it be, the altar itself or some of the materials. It may actually have to do with covering your sloppiness in offering the other sacrifices. And so sinning against God's holy things, also sins of deception. There's actually a long list of ways you might deceive your neighbor that render you specifically guilty. God takes these things personally, and this offering covers those things. And then there's also the sort of sins that you don't know about, or sins that you didn't know about, but then you became aware of. This one is a male lamb. You have to offer a ram without defect, and we don't actually get a description of the ceremony, which I think means by now the author's assuming, Moses, you guys are kind of getting the point. So I'm just going to go ahead and skip over the description of the details on this one. But he does add that in certain situations, compensation should be added to the offering of the animal. Financial, monetary. They didn't have money in the same way we do, but a form of compensation is offered, which both makes things right socially and also acknowledges that part of what's going on in sin is we owe a debt to God that we can't repay on our own. And so we offer the sacrifice to cover, but we also at the same time offer appropriate compensation in these various ways. It's also one that mentions atonement and specifically forgiveness. Now, the meaning that we need to be careful and make sure we get from this is that sin is not just between me and God. God's wrath comes upon us when we come at each other, when we hurt each other, because we are defacing his creation, his people, persons and things that he made. And so, again, let me make sure this is clear. There's a sense in which this offering reminds us that I can't just go to church and worship God and then treat people terribly all the time. No, it doesn't work. God takes these things personally, and there is a responsibility we have to the community as a whole. In terms of the good news, the idea here, again, is fairly clear that you no longer owe God anything. Once you've offered this sacrifice, your debt has been paid. It's kind of interesting. One really powerful instance in the Old Testament of this particular offering is Isaiah 53, a passage that probably was very central for Jesus' own understanding of his calling and his identity. And in this, you have this long phrases you may have heard: pierced for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. And later on in verse 10 of that prophecy, it is that there's a guilt offering that actually solidifies and brings about the forgiveness and restoration of the sinful people. So, man, that's a lot to cover. And actually, that's only the first 5 chapters. Chapters 6 and 7 kind of do a little bit of a run back. Let's just go back and look at all of them one more time. And he adds in some of the details about what the priests are supposed to do. I think part of the point of describing them once and then describing them again is to remind people like you and I, hey, if you don't understand this the first time, nobody understands it the first time. So, study as best you can and then come back around to it and look at it again. The last thing I would like to do before we close this session and move on past this first major part of Leviticus is just tie in some loose ends together and think about how this is relevant for us. And by us, I specifically mean people who are reading this as God's word, having received God's word, the Messiah who's come and died for our sins. How do these things point us to Jesus? And I don't imagine that it's terribly difficult to see, but I want to draw out some of this, specifically when you think about the whole burnt offering, the sin offering, and the guilt offering. Each of these, in important ways, describe what Jesus Christ has done for us. All of him for all of sin. Not just the individual things that I've done wrong, but the very problem that defines me now that I'm a broken, sinful person. The problem of sinfulness is taken care of entirely by the whole sacrifice of Christ's body. He has given himself for us in this regard. You also have this ongoing sense of, but I'm still not quite perfect. I'm still failing. Yes, his death also is a sin offering. As a matter of fact, I think that Paul refers to his death as a sin offering in Romans chapter 8. And I think that he offers it in Romans chapter 8, following on the heels of Romans chapter 7, which is about that sticky residue of sin that can still get in the way of us trying to be holy. I keep falling in. There is atonement. There is forgiveness for those. So there's a completion that's taking place here in this regard. You also have the sin offering mentioned in 2 Corinthians 5:20. God made him who knew no sin to be a sin offering for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. And then as far as the guilt offering is concerned, once again, I would direct your attention right there to Isaiah 53 and reminding you that this really does seal the deal. It really does demonstrate that, in fact, we are forgiven, we are free, we are liberated, our debt is paid. God has invited us into his presence here because of the one sacrifice of Jesus Christ. So there is a sense in which Jesus' death is illuminated for us by these particular offerings. 2 more pieces and then we'll be done. I think this one right here actually is the one that aligns most closely with communion. You think about what we're doing when we take communion. We're not offering a re-sacrifice of Christ, but we're celebrating the fact that the sacrifice has already been offered. We're not begging God to create peace or to reconcile. No, we're acknowledging that he has reconciled us to himself. And there's an appropriate solemnity to this moment, but it's also a moment of celebration. This right here is our communion meal, where we fellowship with God and celebrate the shalom he has provided. And finally, we come back around to the first one. Just as it had a double meaning for them, it has a double meaning for us. First and foremost, it's about Christ taking care of the sin problem. But in a secondary sense, it is also me offering myself, us offering ourselves to God in worship of him. I want to offer him my whole self. You think about Romans 6, offer the parts of your bodies. Romans 12, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. That's this one. And so here in the sacrifices, we don't just find a bunch of strange details. We really, in a way, find a description of the Christian life as a whole. And that is something to be celebrated, and that is something to be studied again and again and again. So I hope you've benefited from our conversation about these sacrifices. Come back next session, and we'll talk about what happens when God actually comes to town. As for now, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace.
So you're the worshiper in Leviticus. Right? Here's your question. You're the worshiper in Leviticus. Not today, in Leviticus. All right? And remember that as the worshiper offering something up to God, you're the one that does the killing. You're the one that gets a knife and cuts the throat. You're the one that chops it up into pieces. And then it's given over to the priest and he puts it on the altar. Okay? You're the worshiper. What are you thinking? Smelling? Seeing? As the worshiper, giving your gift over to God. I know it might be hard for some of us to think about because we live today, but I want us to go back there.
This could be me.
That you're thinking this could be you, okay? What are you seeing or hearing?
Snap, crackle,
What?
snap, crackle, pop.
Snap, crackle, pop.
Prevailing winds.
You're
I'm
hearing
just
a lot of that.
Yeah.
thinking, That's a sacrifice.
What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you thinking?
Bring a lot of animals.
Huh?
There'd be a bleeding of a lot of it, not bleeding, but
Yes.
bleeding of a lot of animals.
Yes?
I'm impressed with the idea that a hot Judean sun would make an awful lot of smell with all that blood.
Yes. So a pretty serious smell.
Yeah, prevailing winds.
What are you seeing, thinking, hearing?
I'm just thinking about the many people who do this sacrificing all at once.
Okay.
How many? I mean, it's the mass.
I'll be confident there's a line. Yeah. Standing in the line with your animal that you've raised and fed, made sure it's perfect. Ben, what are you thinking?
I'm imagining that, you know, I've been thinking about this sacrifice. Maybe I'm making a whole burnt offering. I've been thinking about this upcoming event maybe for a few days. And I've thought about which animal I'm going to choose for my whole burnt offering. I'm looking across my flock. I'm looking for that perfect sacrifice. I'm walking out in the morning after I've been thinking about this. I'm walking out in the morning and I'm putting a rope around the animal's neck and I'm leading it to the altar. All of this is going through my mind. I'm seeing this animal. I've raised this animal. This animal's been part of my life for however many years. I'm walking through the desert. I know what's coming. I know the whole time I'm thinking about my relationship with God, how this animal didn't do anything wrong. This is about me and my relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
This animal is going to pay the price for me before God in order for God to see me. And as I'm walking towards the altar, I have all these thoughts. I'm hearing the animal trotting along. You know, I've got the knife in my hand. I hear the animal breathing.
There's a lot to it, right?
Yeah.
Right? What would you add on to what's been said? You're the worshiper. What are you thinking, seeing, hearing?
I think also, kind of what Ben was saying, but you're offering the best of what you've got.
Yeah?
So then that's a sacrifice
Okay.
because it doesn't continue the line.
Well, it's
of the-
costly,
It's costly.
right?
Yeah.
It's costing you something. Anything else?
Dreading it.
Huh?
I'd be dreading it.
Dreading it? Yeah? Yeah. Why would you be dreading it?
Little animal.
Okay.
And my
What-
friend and, blood and.
Probably named the animal
Why
too.
do I have to do
Fluffy.
this? Yeah.
What about actually doing it? That would you be dreading that too, wouldn't you?
Get my husband to do that. part.
Okay, no. You're the worshiper. You're the worshiper. You're the one that has to do it, right? It's not
Dreading it.
someone else doing it on your behalf. In Leviticus, we know New Testament stuff. What are you thinking? Because I've got two more questions. You won't be able to discuss them or give me answers. I want you to think about them. Anyone else on that first one?
Just have a question. It would just be men.
Would it?
That's what I'm asking.
Okay. If you're worshiping God and you,
No, then, I'm in Leviticus.
yeah, I understand that, yeah. But if you committed sin, what, your husband does it on your behalf?
Well, that,
I wouldn't think so.
men did do a lot of everything back then. and
Okay,
women-
so
yeah.
I would need to think about that more, because then are you really a worshiper of God? Offering stuff up to God, for saying, well, I'm a woman. I would need to look into that a little bit more. Anything else? Here's two questions. And maybe you can answer the last one before the bell rings. Here's question 2. How did those sacrifices help you really understand the importance of Jesus Christ? How did those sacrifices there, and how you offer it up as a worshiper to God, understand the importance, the significance of Jesus Christ? And then here's the third question that maybe you want to answer real quick. What do you learn in this session that you hope you remember? Or what did you learn in this session that you hope you don't forget? So, how do those sacrifices help you really understand the importance, the significance of Jesus Christ? Okay, and then the third question is, what did you learn in this session that you hope you remember or you hope you don't forget? And the bell hasn't buzzed.
I was thinking, if I'm a Jew, then put me there, and I'm around for the cross too. Then maybe you put it all together, and you really saw it in a way
You
that's
would?
deep and meaningful that we just don't get.
They would, yeah. What do you want to not forget in this session?
I feel like, God gave his own son, the lamb,
Yes.
as a living sacrifice for us.
Okay, that's question 2, yeah. What do you not want to forget?
Jesus covered all 5 of those.
Uh-huh, and then some, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, good,
And
don't
all the
forget that.
parallels.
I think these, go ahead, Roger.
Roger,
God
Rod,
expects- God expects your best,
okay,
not a second best.
leftovers,
Right.
Rod?
I think part of it is just thinking about it. There would not only be the blood and everything, but there would be a smell
Yes,
over on the city,
of course,
and reminding me that we are described as the aroma of Christ
yes,
as we sacrifice
yeah,
ourselves.
good. Ben, last word?
Just the seriousness of sin. You know, and there is no such thing as cheap grace.
Okay, all right, good. Last word.
Hank Ankerson one time took a group of us to the local synagogue. And the rabbi spoke to us for about 2 hours. I could have stayed for 4. But they teach their children Leviticus first, and they start at the age of 3. We were aghast at how in the world could they ever, they probably don't understand it. It's a memorization or whatever.
Yes, of
But
course.
at the age of 3, Leviticus.
Wow. Cool. Last word? Going. Gone, thank you, we'll pick it up next week, thank you.
I am.
Sorry. Sorry, you got
At least you got a headache.
You try to
I'm
guide
a
him.
day ahead of Calvin. I feel terrible.